I'm back. I'm back with more Black Sabbath on music, part six, I guess. So today I'm listening to the an amazing bootleg live in Madrid, 1983, from the Born Again tour. I don't know how much of it you can hear in the background. It might just be this big wall of noise. It's not the greatest recorded bootleg, but the band is in top form. You can probably hear the audience over the band, but which it's a dodgy thing. But sounds like they're going into the first song. So anyway, I'm gonna let this play in the background. My cat is trying once again to edge me out and take over, but I'm keeping him at bay. So where were we last time? I was talking about 1992, the fateful reunion of the Mob Rules lineup and the album called Dehumanizer. As I mentioned on there, my last video, this was a great moment in Sabbath history and great moment in my life because I was finally going to go see Black Sabbath. They'd announced a show here in Charlotte. They were going to headline over. For opening band was Trouble, and the second band was going to be Danzig, who I was heavily into at the time. So this was going to be like a perfect storm of metal, but it didn't happen. They canceled. A lot of shows on that tour were canceled, but they did play a lot of great shows, and there was a lot of great footage, some of which I've been playing while I've been talking to you guys. The Oakland show was particularly exciting. The Costa Rica show, there's a Brazil show that was incredible. Just amazing. Monsters of Rock. They did a ton of incredible shows. One in Buffalo, New York. Especially some really keen takes on my favorite, Children of the Sea. Yeah, so I think the song they're playing on this bootleg now is a kind of version of Children of the Grave. Great song. Killen did okay on it. Excuse me, I don't have COVID. Just ate a lot of spicy Mexican food. So, anyway, let's soldier on, shall we? I was a big fan of Dehumanizer. There was also a two cassette set that came out around the same time. The Black Sabbath story, volumes 1 and 2. And volume 1 pretty much went all the way up to right around the Technical Ecstasy-ish era. I don't know why they chose to cut off there instead of just ending with Ozzy, starting fresh with the next chapter with post-Ozzy, but that's the way they did it on the cassette releases. The second cassette started with Never Say Die and the last Ozzy tour and album, and then went all the way to the end, which was the 1990, then current 1992 reunion tour. There's a good bit of footage from that of them playing songs like a great song on the album. The album is loaded with great songs. There's a few songs that are almost like cut filler, like Too Late and Master Insanity, but even they kind of grow on you. But After All the Dead, Time Machine, Letters from Earth, TV Crimes, I mean, good God, Computer God, Peter God, all classics. And all ones that were revisited in later tours by yet another iteration of the same lineup, which we'll get to talking about them probably in the next episode. But for this one, let's talk about the dissolution of, if that's the correct word, of this amazing lineup. the band was, by all accounts, getting along pretty famously on the tour. Things were, all the old fences were mended. Um, but unfortunately, Tony still had this kind of ill-advised, on and off infatuation with the idea of reunion with Ozzy, mainly because of monetary reasons, I think. And, I guess maybe also in some way the chance to play with Bill Ward again, because it seemed like he would only play with Ozzy in the band, even though he had played in the band with Dio and with Ian Gillan and with Dave Donato. He kept saying, I only want to play with Ozzy, but he would continually return to the group. But some of his judgment may have been a bit fogged by a lot of alcohol abuse. It's hard to say. I know he suffered from some depression. Bill's an amazing guy. I mean, by all accounts, he's just an incredible dude. And he certainly did get kind of screwed over with the inevitable total reunion with Ozzy, which we'll get to later on. Not this time, not today. And it's not time today to speak of Ozzy Osbourne with Black Sabbath again, quite yet. We're still kind of getting through the whole deal with Dio. Well, what happened was they lined up a show where they were going to do their set, Black Sabbath, Dio. They're going to be doing, mainly Dio songs Dio did with the band. Then they were going to do a set with Ozzy, doing Ozzy songs of Black Sabbath. Then they were going to open for Ozzy, doing Ozzy solo songs. And knowing Ozzy, he might even have redone some of the same songs again that he did with Black Sabbath with his band. Who knows what kind of mental shape he was in then. But Dio wasn't real thrilled with that. He's like, fuck this, I'm not going to open for Ozzy. I clawed my way back up to the top here with you guys, and we all put up with a lot of each other's bullshit. So, what the hell? Like, what the hell, guy? And that's how I would feel too. I would feel betrayed. Well, so at the last minute, Dio said, this is near the very end of the tour. Contractually, his contract ran out like within a day or two after this. Literally, his tour contract was about to run out, which, he had been planning probably to re-up it, but that was that. So Dio exited. Vinny Appice stayed on the drum stool. They still had to do the show, so they went ahead and recruited at the last minute Rob Halford. 2 nights of Black Sabbath opening for Black Sabbath with Ozzy, opening for Ozzy. And there were some other bands opening for Black Sabbath, like Exodus and forgot the name of the other group, heavy female vocals, just recently got into. But anyway, I recently learned they were the opening before Exodus. And there might have been one other band on there, I'm not sure. It was a big deal, though. It was a hell of a show. I've seen footage, have copies of footage of all of the Sabbath performances with Rob Halford, who graciously stepped in at the last minute, quickly learned tunes. I'm sure he knew a lot of these tunes anyway, being a fan of Sabbath, but he learned a bunch of Dio songs. The rumor at the time is he was going to sing songs from every aspect of their vocal career, with the possible exception of Tony Martin stuff. As it turned out, he did not sing any Glenn Hughes or Ian Gillan stuff, but he not only did the Dio material that Dio was going to do, including a couple of the newer songs like Computer God, which he learned really post haste, but also he did some Ozzy songs that had not been played by the Dio lineup in a long time, if ever. Dio shied away from committing to doing the mid-period Sabbath progressive stuff live, which always kind of sat ill with me because, I think that material should have been front and center through their entire career, but that's just me. I mean, Tony would play riffs from those albums, like the Sabbath Bloody Sabbath riff and so on. Um, but then they would never do the whole song with the vocals and lyrics. But Halford did. I believe they did Symphony of the Universe. And man, a couple of other odd ones. I mean, Dio had done Supernaut and Rock and Roll Doctor of all songs on his tour. So at least Rock and Roll Doctor, that seemed kind of odd. But at least for doing Supernaut, that was a cool restoration from Volume 4. Probably hadn't been played in many years by the band live. Yeah, this bootleg doesn't as good as I remember it being. Mainly the sound quality and mixing is kind of poor, but it is a audience bootleg, so go figure. Gillan sounds good on it for the most part, but he's extremely over the top, and with him being too up front in the vocal mix, it kind of exposes some of his flaws during that tour live. Now they're playing War Pigs, so now we're going to get down to it. Promise this isn't a review of a bootleg. I just keep getting distracted by this brilliance of Sabbath. Even weaker, lesser Sabbath is, masterclass in metal. So, well, yeah. So this has kind of been a meandering, not very informative episode, I have to say. I'm not intoxicated or anything else. I'm just had a rough, kind of nerve-fraying week and a little tired, but had a little burst of energy after lunch and wanted to go ahead and throw some thoughts down here. So you might want to just write off this whole video as a failure, but I'll go ahead and try to salvage it here at the 11th hour. So Dio was out of the band and went through a weird period after that. Of course, the first inclination was to reach out and touch Tony Martin again, and that was successful. Tony Martin was chomping at the bit to return to Black Sabbath. Geezer decided to continue to throw in his lot with Tony, the new Tony, and Jeff Nichols. Vinny Appice decamped and rejoined Dio's solo band, which he had been an original member of, but not a member of for a few years. They got to work on an album right away. So did Sabbath, for better or worse. In my opinion, for worse. I think the next to the weakest studio album Black Sabbath has conjured in their career was the next thing called Cross Purposes. So once again, taking a page or two out of Ritchie Blackmore's Rolodex, they enlisted Bobby Rondinelli, formerly of Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, to be their new drummer. They recorded an album called Cross Purposes. It wasn't that well received, and nor should it have been. It was a fairly weak album. There were a few decent moments, like Virtual Death, which was a cool song that Geezer Butler wrote the music and apparently lyrics for. Some of the songs on this album were riffs that were kind of, as I understand it, left over from Geezer's GZR project he'd been working on. So he was helping write the music and lyrics again, but I think the tension between his contributions maybe not as inspired as they were on The Humanizer, and the Nichols Martin axis of songwriting, everything was very watered down, very diluted, very safe. The production was very safe. It was really kind of the beginning of the end for the creative spark that was Black Sabbath. They would really only have one more major creative spark, arguably two, after this period, but this is kind of when they were falling into disrepair. And I don't know. As I understand it, at some point during the on and off touring, which ended up in a live video and the live album, Cross Purposes Live, their second live album ever, um, Rondinelli was out. And so for a while, Bill Ward picked back up with the group, and you had essentially the Heaven and Hell Born Again instrumental lineup again. You had Iommi, Butler, Ward, Nichols, but with Tony Martin singing. And I've seen some live footage. They did a few shows together. Bill Ward seemed like he was kind of phoning it in. Bill Ward could be the most ferocious beast of a drummer, just absolutely brilliant and inventive, or he could just kind of be just slogging it away, way at it. Just that's unfortunate. But this is a truly bizarre version of War Pigs. There's tons of effects on Gillan's voice. So here we go. I don't know if you can hear that pterodactyl wail that is Ian Gillan, but wow, that is a human voice. So kind of a banshee, wailing banshee. So yeah, things kind of got weird, and once again there was rumbles of let's get back with Ozzy, especially with Bill Ward having been briefly in the fold, but that didn't come to be. And so we're hitting on towards 1994-ish, and Geezer's out of the band again. And so Tony Iommi, Tony Martin, and Jeff Nichols once again are without a rhythm section. And once again, they enlist the tier rhythm section of Neil Murray and Cozy Powell. So by this time, there was a lot of weird stuff going on with Cozy Powell. He had some health issues, and I don't know. I don't think he was quite as enthused as he had been. I think the next album that they all recorded together, it's the second album recorded by the same lineup that did Tear. As a follow-up to Tear, it was pretty weak. It was sub-tier, and it was just not very convincing. Of all people, they got Ernie C. from the guitar player from Ice-T's heavy metal outfit Body Count to produce the album. Now, I happen to like the Body Count album, and I wasn't really happy that they pulled some of the songs because of irritation by Charlton Heston and all these, pro cop guys. Yeah, that was disturbing, but they did. They've been under the pressure, and but I liked that album. I thought it was a fine kind of guilty pleasure metal thing, which Ice-T claimed was his homage to his days enjoying Sabbath and Bloister Cult, Deep Purple, and heavier bands. So they went ahead and did this album. And to be honest, man, the whole thing, the cover is interesting. It's kind of a cool little cartoon of all the members of the group plus Ernie C. and Ice-T. There is a song that's a duet with Ice-T on vocals. The only duet between a standing Sabbath vocalist and a non-member on record. The whole guest thing with Sabbath never seemed to really. So a lot of bands is fine, but with Sabbath it seemed to be they needed to stick with who was in the group, and that was their kind of monolithic fortress they had to kind of ensconce themselves in. Having the guests like Brian May and Ice-T, it really was just for appearances. It wasn't particularly amazing work by either of those gentlemen. So, album is really forgettable. There's like Rusty Angels and I don't know. Forbidden, is there a song called Forbidden? I mean, I hate to be so indifferent. I mean, I did in one time or another record all the songs. I probably still have all the songs somewhere in my massive digital Sabbath library. I just don't know if I'll ever listen to them again. Don't know that I haven't. And the Forbidden album as one piece, um, recorded. I think it's their weakest studio statement ever. Um, there's one song I really like. I think it's the last song on the album. And I don't really like the song title, Kiss of Death, but I like the lyrics. I like the vibe of it, the desperation of the lyrics, the power of the music, the some of the bass drum, double bass drum work by Cozy is, it's simple, but man, it's some of the most effective percussion he did in his whole time with Black Sabbath. Um, Kiss of Death is an awesome song. If that album had just been Kiss of Death, it would have been a masterpiece, at least of that era, of that kind, of its kind, but it wasn't. So they did a tour, and I've seen a few shows, and uninspired. Tony Martin was having some vocal issues, and just, I don't know. I don't think the band was feeling it anymore. I know I wasn't feeling it as a listener. Um, there were people who still swore by this kind of stuff. The Martin devotees still managed to find something from Forbidden to like or even love, maybe even worship. But to me, it's more like a eulogy of Black Sabbath. The end of the end, not the end of the beginning, as they later came to, and not the beginning of the end, but pretty much the end of the end. Until the next year when the Ozzy thing reared its head again. Technically, on paper, Tony Martin, Jeff Nichols were still members of the band, but it just Tony Iommi cashed in all his chips, as did Geezer and Bill, and they reunited with Ozzy for a 1997 world tour, and they put out a subsequent album called Reunion, a live album, which is a pretty good album. It's probably the best Ozzy had sounded live in many years. And they picked some gems from Sabbath's different periods that they had not really played live in many years, since the mid period. Stuff that I don't even think they played on the Technical Ecstasy and Never Say Die tours. Um, things like Dirty Women. Well, I know they played Dirty Women on the Technical Ecstasy tour. Dirty Women is a classic off Technical Ecstasy. But other tracks as well, obscure. I don't want to say obscure, but just long neglected. I don't know, like Behind the Wall of Sleep. I mean, heck, man, this is going pretty deep into the catalog. So it was a fair album. Um, but, it was kind of where Sabbath then stuck with the next few years in a rut, basically, playing Ozfest, headlining under Ozzy Solo at Ozfest. So they became kind of an adjunct band to Ozzy. How the Mighty Fall. So that was kind of their lot for the rest of the 1990s and into the early 2000s. A lot of people saw them on those tours. A lot of people were very excited about them. There were a couple of new studio tracks, by the way, recorded for Union, I believe. One was called Psycho Man, and one was called Losing My Religion. No, it wasn't. That was REM. Something like that. Something along those general lines. I thought they were wretched. They sounded like subpar Ozzy solo stuff, which Ozzy solo stuff already, to me, was subpar, even beneath albums like Forbidden, even though it was vastly more commercially successful. Go figure. Not a fan of the Ozzy solo catalog, with the exception of the first two albums, and maybe one or two songs here and there. I mean, I liked the song he did with Lita Ford about closing his eyes forever. That was a cool song, but it might have been more about Lita Ford than Ozzy. Um, yeah, so I guess we're coming to the inescapable conclusion that not a fan of Ozzy Osbourne as an institution, as a solo artist, as a TV star, any of that stuff. It just never sat right with me. Maybe it was the era that I came up in. Um, it just seemed like there was no reason to go backward to that. But that had not been proven yet because they still had not managed to squeeze out a new studio album. And Ozzy kept putting it off, and Sharon kept putting it off, and Tony and company, I guess they kept putting off as well, though, from what I've read. Tony Geezer and Bill were eager to record because they're about playing, man. They're musicians. They like to play, and they like to play with each other. I mean, however that sounds, they like to play together. So that's the spirit, and they liked to play with Ozzy, but Ozzy wasn't really about playing with the band. He hadn't been since the early years, and that's why he was kicked out of the band in 1978 because after he'd already quit and come back for contractual reasons, just for money to do the Never Say Die album and tour for the 10th anniversary tour. But Ozzy wanted to do his own thing. Ozzy wanted to be Ozzy, the star, the center of attention. Sabbath wanted to write and record and play music. And there's a difference, and I know many people will disagree with me. I'm in a really wonderful Facebook Black Sabbath group that's many, like thousands strong, maybe 90,000 members. And I love the group because it does examine all eras of the band, and tries to consider everything, much as Joel Seidler's great website does, which I did link to last time, and I'll continue to link to. Black Sabbath, black-sabbath.com, whatever, Black Sabbath online. But, within that group, there is a lot of worship of Ozzy, and Ozzy just doesn't interest me. I think the record should be set straight again and again and again about who did what in Black Sabbath and who deserves what kudos. Ozzy did some amazing vocal work on some, and very distinctive, certainly, on some incredible albums. He had a certain, I guess you could say, charisma, showmanship, whatever. But I think it's been made much more of. I think it's been made to be about much more than that. And I think it's because a lot of people don't really understand the dynamics of a band. They become partisans to certain lineups, certain eras, certain lead singers, certain sounds. And that's what they know, that's what they love, and they're not going to budge from that. And then they're just going to continue to double down on that kind of septic, toxic, ingrown lack of aesthetics. And I'm not that kind of person. So that's why Sabbath being metal is not important to me, and Sabbath being, the original band isn't important to me. What's important to me is who wrote the material, who created the concepts for the band, who follows that through the history of a band. You may like a certain sound of a certain musician or singer, but if that musician or singer is not integral to the concept of the band within the way the band works and operates, and maybe the only way someone can ever know this is to, as I have before, been in a few bands, because then you really see it, and you see who is dispensable and who is indispensable within a group. Ozzy Osbourne was absolutely dispensable within Black Sabbath, at least by the mid-70s. And from a writing viewpoint, all along. Did he help shape their sound and their image? Absolutely. Did he help them become popular? Absolutely. But do I enjoy this work with them? Those first 8 albums, yes, I do. Uh, I can't say I care for the studio work, the little bit of studio work he's done since then with them. Um, he brings a lot of baggage, a lot of freight, and he's always been a dividing and sticking point among fans and among the band members themselves. He's part of the reason Bill Ward is so messed up about going and coming and going back and forth. Bill Ward had much more impact on the sound and the attitude of Black Sabbath than Ozzy ever did. And Bill Ward is, once he had his head together, he was ultimately given the shaft forevermore. When Sabbath ended, he was not a member in good standing. He was not a member. It was like he never existed, kind of. But we'll get to that. Uh, this is just how I view it. You may vehemently, violently disagree with me. That's okay, but facts do back up what I'm saying. And we'll get into a lot of the things that I've culled from numerous interviews and, essays and books and websites over the years, just the facts of the matter. I mean, I'm not here to make a case that Ozzy wasn't important to Black Sabbath or to debunk 50 years worth of disinformation, misinformation. But I'd like to do my part not to add to it. I'd like to do my part to keep it real and with the help of great resources like Joe Seigler's website and many other valuable sources. I think I've been able to do that. So I'd like to share that information. So once I wrap up my personal encounters with Sabbath along the way in the next couple episodes, then I'm going to get into the whole history of Sabbath, and we'll talk about who did what for real and who deserves what plaudits. We're not going to say who doesn't deserve plaudits. They all deserve some kind of plaudits. Even Eric Singer, I mean, for what he did, was that kind of clunk, clunk, clunk drumming. I guess it had its appeal, to his adherents. Not my thing, but it worked. It worked at the time for what it was. And I think the reason Ozzy was able to kind of bully his way black into Sabbath with Sharon Light Along for the Ride in the late 90s was because they had run out of steam on their own. They didn't have a creative will anymore. That situation changed in the 2000s, and we'll talk about that next time. It changed in a big way and over a period of a few years, and there was a chance to go in a different direction. But fate had other plans. So we'll talk about that next time. Anyway, thanks for watching and take it easy. As always, thanks for listening. I know I'm controversial here, but bear with me. You might get something out of these, you might not. But anyway, rock on.